Hey guys, and welcome back to another sketching and drawing with the Wacom Pen Touch Small. Um, I apologize. I was gonna originally do this kind of Walking Dead inspired piece that I was working on. This piece was gonna be for one of my friend's sons. He does streaming on Twitch, goes by the name of a Crazy Zombie. So I was gonna just draw something up real quick and just kind of give it to him if he wanted to use it for his intro in his YouTube or maybe his YouTube header or maybe even his Twitch profile. Just kind of give him something if he wanted to use and just have for his channels. But unfortunately, my hard drive decided to crash, and the only thing I was able to really recover was just this piece from the cloud. Um, I'm going to try to hook that hard drive back up to another system to do a file recovery, but it pretty much has seen its days, and I think I may have lost all the footage of me doing the initial sketch and kind of really quick draft to the line art and starting the shading. So unfortunately, I did lose that footage. So I thought I'd go ahead and show you on another piece that I'm starting, just to kind of give you an idea of how it is that I start to do a drawing or Adobe Illustrator digital drawing. Now with this one, like I said, I kind of draw a little bit unorthodox, even on pencil and paper. I usually start off with, well, really pretty much everybody kind of starts off with a really basic shape, and then you start putting your underpainting, your sketch on top of that, kind of showing like, okay, here's where I'm going to go with this, and here's what I kind of would like it to do. Myself, like I said, I do it very unorthodox. I start just drawing. I got an idea in my head of what I want to do, and I just kind of put something really quick, jot it down, and then just start doing some really quick line work. Like, okay, here's where the clothes are going to go, here's how the folds are going to work, here's the basic shape, here's what I got in my head. And then after I do my initial two sketches, I'll take it into like a line art phase, and then just kind of play with shading. Now, normally this would be a rough sketch for me, but I was kind of liking the way it was going, so I just continued on with it. Like, yeah, I kind of like the way what I'm seeing, so let's continue on with it. But like I said, unfortunately, my computer or my hard drive just didn't want to cooperate, so it just decided for me, nope, you're done with this one. But for right now, let's go ahead and start the video, or start with the initial preliminary sketch the way that I normally draw, or that I'm starting to draw in Adobe Illustrator. Normally, what I would do is I would sketch something out on paper, just kind of bring it in, a real rough idea, real rough edit, put it into Illustrator, and I'll just start using that to build my shapes and see where I can take everything to. But lately, what I've been doing is, you know what? Let's just do everything in Illustrator. Let's just do the initial sketch all the way down to the final render. So with that being said, let's start the actual video, or the actual uh, drawing or stages that I go through with my sketching to finalize piece. Now here what I'm doing, I usually set my Illustrator to use a 3-point brush round, and usually on my sensitivity I have it a little bit high on the firm setting with the Wacom uh, control panel. And like I said, I usually just start off with extremely basic rough idea. Okay, here's where the hands are going to go, kind of like the arms, and just kind of get really generic shapes up, just kind of get everything to scale the way that I like. Right here what I'm doing is I'm getting the feathers and just kind of like the hood, the perspective, what I'm really kind of seeing in my head. I'm just kind of jotting it down like, okay, here's kind of how I want everything laid out. Here's where I'm starting to do the horns and just kind of getting the idea, the rough idea. Now the one thing about Illustrator or digital drawing, the great thing is, don't be afraid to use everything. Even though you have a drawing tablet, still you can use the other tools. Like there I was using pads to kind of get the shape for the sword that he's going to use. Use all the tools that you have at your disposal. Don't just stick to, I have to draw everything out. Such as I'm doing here, I'm actually using pads to kind of get the horns the way that I have in my head. Um, I'm just doing a copy and paste and switching it over, or moving it over and flipping it horizontal. The reason I'm doing that, like I said, even though you can draw it out, and sometimes it is a little bit faster to draw the shape out, there's times where it's really helpful to get kind of like those really hard, crisp lines. And with pads, it's really easy to do, and it sometimes works out a little bit better because you're not having to do as much cleanup later. And like I said here, I'm just kind of getting really basic. Okay, here's where the face is going to go, the head. I already started noticing that it was perspectively, um, the bird's eye kind of view of the head isn't really where I want it to be, but that's okay. This is just my first initial rough edit sketch. I'm just trying to lay everything out like, okay, this is kind of like how I want it to go. So later on, when I actually go into the render, I'll kind of correct everything and just kind of make things work better. Now here what I'm doing, I'm just using the shapes that I've already outlined out, and I'm just kind of applying like, okay, here's how the feathers are actually going to look. Here's how I want things to really kind of start taking form. Now nothing is really done to scale. I'm just really quickly jotting everything down so I have the idea that's in my head down on paper. Once I get the rough idea, I'll switch it to like a lighter blue color. It's an old comic book thing. Whenever I was doing some comic book artwork, it's easier on the eyes, to tell you the truth. I'll drop the opacity down, use the blue. That way I can see like, okay, here's the basic outline. Now let's actually put the blacks and the line work on top of that so I can kind of get a better visual representation when I'm doing my inking process. And there again, you can see I'm using pads to kind of get the rough idea of some of the shapes for the armor. And because I used pads up there, it was a little bit easier. Well, actually, it was a lot easier to actually kind of do the horn work that I have in my head. He's going to have two different types of scales on his horns. So it was a lot easier to kind of like, okay, let's just use pads, get the basic form for it, the flow. That way, when I do go in with the tablet, it's easier and it's faster for me to just kind of mock up like, okay, here's how I want everything to line up. And again, what I just did there was a copy, paste, and then a flip horizontal. That's perfectly great to do, guys. Um, don't be afraid to do that. It saves a lot of time on trying to get everything looking symmetrical, and you can touch it up and make it different later on in the shading process. Even though the line art is pretty much the identical, well, it is identical to each other on both sides, the shading's really going to what makes it stand out just a little bit differently from the left to right, like on the horns. And don't be afraid, like I said, right here I'm just kind of getting an idea of how I want to do the armor, kind of how I want to do the face shapes and everything else. Whenever I was originally doing this, I was going to have him with an actual face, showing menacing underneath the hood. But I started noticing, like, it would be really good or really great to use like some negative space, use shadow work, shadow play, and use the shadows to kind of like form into like a shadow of a skull on top of his flesh or on top of his face itself. So right now, I'm not going to really focus too much on that. I just kind of got a rough idea, even though it's not drawn exactly the way I would want. Uh, Again, this is just the sketch phase, so it's pretty much a throwaway this point right here. None of this is actually going to get used in the actual render. So I just went ahead and kept it like, okay, I'm going to remodel it anyway, but at least we got the foundation started off. Now with the armor, this again is where I'm using paths to kind of just adjust like, okay, I like the way this is taking shape, but I'm going to just clean it up a little bit, get rid of some of the endpoints or the markers, and just kind of clean it up a little bit. For me, I definitely think I'm going to use paths to actually do the armor. It just gives a little bit sharper, cleaner edges. But for right now, so I can kind of get an idea on paper, I'm just going to quickly sketch it out like, okay, here's where the joint's going to be, here's where how the armor's actually going to flow with one another. So I'm just going to go ahead and just jot it down. That way when I come back in on the final render, I can actually see what I had in my head and pad it out to where it's really crisp and clean. And like I was saying, guys, this stage you're in sketch mode. It's okay if you're going to erase. It's okay if you're going to have stuff overlapping and stuff like that. You're really just kind of getting your idea down on paper. So when you actually take it into your final render, you got a better understanding of how things want to flow. So here, what I was thinking was, hey, instead of using the traditional kind of like tattoo style with long strokes to show the wings, I thought, hey, let's give it a different flavor. Let's use hair strands, kind of like, um, yeah, I guess you can say, let's use hair strands. Just kind of see what works best for the design that I kind of got. I started to like it the more I was doing it. So I was like, you know what? Let's just do a little bit more feathers and see how things kind of take shape with a little bit of shading, a little bit of line work. Just yeah, it's starting to turn into something that I'm liking. So I think that's definitely the way that I'm going to go with this piece. Instead of doing kind of like the comic book or tattoo style, I'm going to go with a mixed variety of flavor with this one. And again, I got to starting to do the horns, kind of like the shading and the line work. Originally, I don't know if like I said, I draw unorthodox. I kind of see where the piece takes me. I was thinking, man, I might take this into Photoshop and do actual digital painting instead of vector art, just vector art or vector line art shading. But the more I started playing with everything, the more I was kind of like, you know what, I'm kind of liking the way things are going. I might keep this an Adobe Illustrator only piece. Maybe I'll do a couple little highlights and stuff like that in Photoshop, but I'm kind of liking the way um, the vector art is going itself. But the one thing that I will say, guys, when I did the update to Windows 10, I didn't check my Wacom settings to make sure that my account was actually logged in and my settings transferred over. It's been years since I've drawn. I'm a front end coder and I do a lot of other things as far as like graphic design. I don't actually draw that much, and I haven't in quite some time. I think the last time I've done anything on pencil and paper, it's been probably about 10 years. So whenever I picked up this Wacom tablet just to kind of get an idea, like, hey, let's see what this can do. Um, I played a lot with the settings to kind of see what worked for me, and I started noticing, like, man, I'm really rusty. Like, my lines are coming in really thick, and I was getting a little frustrated. But then it dawned on me, oh, you did the Windows 10. Make sure your account's logged in for your cloud settings. Once I did that, I saw, oh, wow, I don't have the firmness set on my brush. That's why I wasn't getting the actual real pressure sensitivity with thin lines to thick. So make sure with your tablet, always check to make sure that your settings are actually set the way that you need it to before you get to a certain point with your piece and you're like, oh, I got to redo all of this all over again. The good thing is, like I said, this is the really rough edit sketch portion of this design. None of this is really going to get used, so I'm okay with the thick, uh, having more thick lines than what I normally would. But just make sure you always check your settings. And right here, like I said, I kind of had an idea whenever I was drawing it out, like, hey, it'd be kind of cool to use like a little bit of negative space, go back in later and kind of mimic or kind of show the shadow effects on his face to form into a skull. It was going in a direction that I kind of liked, but once I realized, like, man, my Wacom settings weren't set correctly, I wanted to get back to the feathers to kind of see, like, okay, do I really like the hair strand idea that I was having, um, or not? Now that I actually got it set the way that I like, so I just kind of started drawing out really quick back on the feathers, just to kind of see, like, okay, how's this going to work out, better. Started to really, and I still like it better. So I'm just using the different areas right now. I'm going to use different arches to kind of show a hint of feathers forming into feathers, just stuff like that. So I'm just kind of getting my rough, basic idea of how this piece will flow and how everything will work out as I continue on. But yeah, that pretty much does it for this portion of this design. Um, like I said, this is my very rough sketch just to get something down on paper. That way, when I actually do the actual drawing or the render version of it, this will also be uh, have the transparency set down so I can actually use it as a reference for when I actually do the piece itself. But yeah, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Um, don't and like I said, don't be afraid with digital art. What I love about it versus traditional pen and ink art is if you make a mistake in digital art, you can always Control Z. Control Z is your friend, or you can always erase. That's what I really love about drawing in Illustrator now. With traditional pen and ink, if you made a mistake, you had to white it out, or sometimes had to start over, or really reshape something to correct that error. With this, what I really love, I mean, Control Z, you can go right back to where you were. So, if anything that I can ever suggest is really start getting used to just, instead of just doing the full piece, from a sketch, kind of start getting your hand used and loose to being able to just use the tablet to draw an Illustrator from start to finish. If that's not really your style, that's perfect. Keep doing the sketches, bring it in, but don't focus too much on everything must be perfect. With digital art, it's really fun to go back and say, okay, let's take a break from that portion. Let's go ahead and delete it. I don't like the way it's going. Let's start over a little bit later. Let's move on to this other side, or let's move over to this other area, and then we'll come back to this portion that's giving us trouble, and we'll restart it again. And I hope that y'all enjoyed that part one of the initial preliminary sketching. That was about 30 minutes of just kind of laying everything out, getting the foundation, the sketch done. Like I said, I didn't really want a long video, so I think I'm going to do it in parts for that piece, or pretty much maybe for everything that I do. I think I'll do it in parts. That way you're not getting like 30-minute videos, 40-minute videos. I'll show like the sketch area when I start actually getting everything the way that I like, to where I'm actually doing the finalized line art, shading, maybe digital painting in Photoshop, stuff like that. And again, guys, sorry for losing the footage on this piece. I was really having fun with it too. Was really wanting to use it, but who knows? If y'all want me to, like I said, I can get back to it. I'll pretty much start from right here, the starting point, and just kind of use the sketch that I already have laid out for it, and just can continue on from there. But anyway, I hope that y'all enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments, don't forget to leave them in the comments below. I will do my best to get to them as soon as I see them. Um, and if you do have a drawing tablet, or an Intuos, or a Pen and Touch, or Cintiq, don't forget, get a video up on YouTube. This is definitely something that's a great hobby, great to practice on, and maybe even take as a career. So also record yourself doing some artwork and put it up on YouTube. I'd love to see what y'all are doing as well. But until then, have a good one. Take care, guys.